first things first. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright.
Good morning, everyone. Your dress looks lovely today, Jenna.
Thank you, Nick. That was so nice, since I was going to start with something not as...
Oh, what were you going to start
I was
with?
going to tell you that my afternoon yesterday was lovely. Everything was going great. I was happy with my lot in life. Then Nick Wright's lovely wife, Danielle, posts a picture of your daughter doing a 3,000-piece puzzle. Oh. And I looked over at my daughter, who had a crayon like this going like this.
In the defense of your children, my daughter had the assistance of someone with, I think, a couple master's degrees, someone that is not me. So that was, she had some assistance there. Cris Carter, how are you this morning?
Very good.
No puzzles in the Carter household?
No. All my kids are grown.
All kids are grown and gone. Thank goodness.
Thank you. Did you look up there for a second?
Thank you.
Perfect. All right. Let us start this morning. A lot of NFL tidbits to talk about. NFL free agency doesn't start till tomorrow, but why wait till tomorrow when you can go to Denver today?
And talk about another one of Jenna's children, Case Keenum.
I've got a new favorite NFL team, guys.
Okay.
That's apparently what Case Keenum is saying as well. The former Vikings quarterback will reportedly sign with the Broncos. So then you took my line away. What that means is I have a new bandwagon to jump to the back of. Keenum became the Vikings' darling last season after he took him to the NFC title game. He threw for 22 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last season. Broncos certainly need a shot in the arm. They finished the season 5-11 last year. So Case Keenum at least has 2 fans to start off his days in Denver. Cece, what's your reaction to Case Keenum signing with the Denver Broncos?
I like the fact that a player like Case, you know, he's been around the league for long enough. He's not new. He's not a young, aspiring player. You know, Case is 30 years old. That's kind of going to be the theme of my show, the ages of the players. But at this point, he kind of took control of his career. He had the best year of his life. Compared to sitting around in some euphoria, he realized, man, I got limitations. All right? The Vikings don't want me as much as I would want them to want me, because his first preference would have been to stay in Minnesota. He was very familiar. They play indoors. They have a tremendous defense. But the Vikings didn't extend the type of faith that John Elway and the Broncos had in trying to sign Case. They didn't make Case a significant offer the way the Broncos did in being aggressive, because the Vikings, I'm sure we'll talk about plenty later in the show, they have their sights on some other quarterbacks. And I don't believe that Zimmer, the coach, and Rick Spielman, the general manager, that they thought Case was that much better than Teddy Bridgewater. Because last year during the season, if you remember, all the stories that were coming out of Minnesota was, Jenna, you were totally upset about the whole thing. Well, when is Case going to get benched? Right. When is Teddy going to get the job? Teddy got healthy. They made Teddy active. They gave him a few reps in practice. They liked that. They gave him a little bit of reps in the game in mop-up duty. But Case, I like he took control. He found someone who was in love with him, that's Denver, and went out there and aggressively they pursued each other. I believe it's a good fit for them. And Denver gets their franchise quarterback without mortgaging their future. They have some high-priced guys. They don't have the salary flexibility that some other teams might have. But getting your quarterback and getting that resolved is a good thing for the Denver Broncos. The only thing is, we don't know who Case is going to be. And in 2008.
And his head coach, or his previous head coach, Mike Zimmer, was questioning exactly who Case is going to be as recently as at the NFL Combine. I didn't see this quote when it happened last week, but when I was reading up about this signing, I came across, I think Greg Rosenthal included it on his piece on NFL.com, that Mike Zimmer last week at the Combine said, well, are we going to get the Case of last year or the Case of 2 years ago?
Now, when he said it, it really didn't mean that much. But now that Case is immediately the first day of free agency, he goes to Denver, it means a lot more today in real time than it did then.
Absolutely, because it means that either A, the Vikings didn't extend him a good offer, or maybe didn't extend him any type of significant offer whatsoever.
Or maybe he just saw that they've been looking at Kirk Cousins for the last couple of weeks
and didn't want to wait.
He wasn't their number one priority,
and didn't want to wait. But the thing is, when we have the pieces of evidence of the things that may or may not have been being whispered in Chris's ear throughout the year about Teddy. Like, whenever Chris says sometimes he has sources and sometimes he has sources, like when it's the Vikings, I think it's the real types of sources as opposed to his Doppler radar for his weather sources. And so I listened to that closely. And then you also see the things Zimmer was saying very openly and publicly. And then you have Case Keenum, a guy who, despite being in the league for almost a decade, for 7-8 years now, has not made significant NFL money ever. He was an undrafted player. He was always a guy that was fighting for a roster spot. Right. And so my guess is this is going to land somewhere around the deal Mike Glennon got, around 3 years, around $45 million, around $20 million guaranteed. Could be a little higher, a little lower, something like that. This is obviously life-changing money, and he goes to a team where unless they draft a quarterback at number 5, which you won't imagine they'll do with this move, he gets to be the unquestioned starter for a team for the first time since he was at the University of Houston setting records. Because Trevor Siemian is now on the trade block. Now, I will say to this case, though. While I'm happy for him, and he's been a great citizen his whole NFL career, he went to a place that's tough for quarterbacks. Not just because every team in that division is outdoors, but how about Joey Bosa twice a year? How about Justin Houston twice a year? How about Khalil Mack twice a year? You have 3 of the premier pass rushers in football that make up 40% of your schedule.
He went to basically the opposite of what he had in Minnesota, which was indoors, which was a system that a lot of quarterbacks could have succeeded in, to a place where he's going to have to be the guy. But here's what stresses me out about Case Keenum. We might as well start early. I feel like this, because they didn't go to the Super Bowl, the dialogue of which Case Keenum are we going to see is what we keep talking about. Well, why don't we say that about Nick Foles? I know he was okay, then he was great, then he was okay. But we don't say that because he won the Super Bowl.
You would say that about Nick.
If he got as far as
if he got a contract. If Nick Foles right now, if Nick Foles were a free agent.
If he was a starter.
And he was a starter, it shouldn't stress you out, Jenna. This is Case wants that. Case wants to actually be discussed.
You mean the doubt?
Yeah, because it means, you know, when you doubt people you care about.
Yeah, every player, too, that has a similar resume like that, you love to be able to prove people wrong. And Case this is this first legitimate opportunity for a franchise. Like, it's the first time. So when you haven't made the money, and Nick, that's very, very important. Because money to him was probably the biggest driver. Because whoever he signed with, they were going to be extending some type of faith to him as a starter. But the money lets you know how much faith they have in you. And when you've never had that big contract, you've never had a franchise turn the keys over to you, I believe that's just as important in this as any other thing compared to location, indoors, outdoors. Do they have a good offense? Do they have a good defense?
And I know we're going to talk about the Vikings because they're in the running for Kirk Cousins. They may be in the running for Drew Brees. Chris tried to do a little Viking recruitment on Twitter yesterday regarding Drew Brees. But when I saw this news this morning, because it broke around 2:30 in the morning. So when I woke up about an hour later, I saw this news. I remembered what Coach Mangini said, which was we shouldn't phrase it like the Vikings have their choice of 3 quarterbacks, because they don't. They didn't with Case, Bradford, and Bridgewater. Not once you let them all hit free agency.
Right, they could have.
They could have, but once you don't franchise any of them, once you don't lock any of them up early, the Vikings all of a sudden, like, Case is gone now. Like, Case is gone. I don't think they want to go into the year with Sam Bradford as the only guy because of his incredible injury history. So all of a sudden the Vikings, they could be upgrading at quarterback with Kirk Cousins, maybe with the Hail Mary of Drew Brees, but they also, we got to see how this shakes out for them because none of their 3 quarterbacks from last year are under contract.
Let's go back to the Broncos for just a second, and we are going to talk about the Viking side of it. Did they get considerably better? Knowing what we know and don't know about Case Keenum, do you think the Broncos got that much better than what they had last year?
I think he's a better quarterback than Trevor Siemian. Do I think he's a better quarterback than Brock Osweiler? Yes, but they have to put the supporting pieces around. You cannot get Case hit. You have to have a running game. And the wide receivers, man, they got to play better than what they've played in Denver. So it's a lot of pressure on Case, but if they don't support him, man, he'll be just like all the other quarterbacks, even Peyton Manning in his last year where he struggled. You need the support. Case. He is not the kind of guy that you can back him up 40 times from the shotgun and pass, and especially given who they're going against in that division, as far as those rushers and everything. Man, Case has got to have some support. But Denver, they believe in him. I believe he can be a starter. And being a starter in the AFC, I mean, he's right in the middle of the pack. If he had stayed in the NFC, I mean, what number starter is he in the NFC? If he stays in Minnesota, he's...
Well, he's behind Rodgers, Brees, Wilson, Wentz, Cam, Ryan, Goff, Dak, Jimmy G.
Yeah, he's right there.
So, like, there's 10 names. In the AFC, once you get past Brady, Big Ben, Luck, and Rivers, then you're at Derek Carr. Then you're at Deshaun Watson. You know what I mean? Guys that there's more
you're in the top 10.
Right. You're instantly in the top 10. Real quick before we move on. What does this mean for Von Miller? Von Miller, who has been sending candygrams to Kirk Cousins. Von Miller, who's been out there heavily recruiting Kirk Cousins. Does he need to say anything to Case?
No, this I knew that wouldn't go well for Von, you know, that recruiting and doing it publicly. But I try to tell Von, he's making a lot of money. He's the leader of that team. And when you don't have a marquee quarterback, they let you know he's the leader of the team.
We're moving on to the NFC West because it's mid-March, so why not? Let's talk football. Former Seattle Seahawk Richard Sherman signed with the 49ers over the weekend. Now, one of the reasons he gave for doing so was to have the opportunity to play his old team twice a year. Who you calling old? The second reason was quarterback Jimmy Garoppolo, who Sherman said, quote, was a huge part of the reason he wanted to play with the 49ers. Nick, I'll start with you. Are you buying all the hype surrounding Jimmy Garoppolo? Let's keep in mind how many games he did play last season. Good ones.
I mean, he played in 6. He started 5 for the San Francisco 49ers, and he obviously was undefeated in those 5. He played well. During those 5, he was top 6 in the NFL in a lot of important passing categories. I get all that. Am I buying all the hype? Well, I mean, if we're anointing him as a top 5 quarterback, no. If we're saying he could be a top 10 quarterback, possibly. Do I think they probably paid a little more than his production will warrant? Sure. But it doesn't really matter if I'm buying the hype, if free agents are. Like I said when they got Jimmy Garoppolo, that their ideal situation is to not play him so they could pay him less this offseason, because what they were going to pay him a ton no matter what. But if he had a great month like he did, they end up having to make him the highest paid player in the history of the league.
They were probably planning to do that if not for an injury.
Well, they were planning to make him a high paid player. I don't know if it would have been the highest paid in the history of the league. But I maybe disregarded the potential benefits of him playing well, which are, yeah, you might have less salary cap space, but you all of a sudden might become a more attractive free agent destination. Because I believe when players are looking at teams to sign with, the first thing they look at is money. And money being equal, the next thing they look at is, do I have a chance to win? Well, maybe playing time is the next thing they look at, but if they're a starter, then do I have a chance to win? And do I have a chance to win is as closely correlated with do they have a quarterback as anything else in football. So I'm curious to see a team in San Francisco that desperately needs skill position players. Carlos Hyde's a free agent. I don't think Pierre Garçon's the number 1 in this league. Like, they need to be able to attract quality players this offseason if other people are saying what Richard Sherman's saying, which is, I believe in this team partially because of the good-looking kid playing quarterback.
Yeah, I think Jimmy G is going to be a good quarterback. Also, that's to be one of the attractions to San Francisco. Let's not forget, this is a great franchise. Not in the recent history, but this is a great franchise. It's one of the marquee franchises in the National Football League. But it wasn't only just the franchise. It wasn't only the quarterback. But let's just say, benefit of the doubt, that he went to college in that area. So that would be attractive. What about being familiar with your opposition, that being the division he played in? He spent his whole career in Seattle. So they've played in the NFC West. So he knows the wide receivers for every team in that division. And as importantly, he knows the wide receivers on Seattle that he's been going against every day in practice. So I'm sure he goes into that decision with a lot of confidence. So, yes, it was partly the quarterback. Yes, and it is important to have a quarterback as a defensive player, but it's all these other things. Now, on the other side, Aqib Talib, he had a chance to go to San Francisco. He said he didn't want to go there. So before they got Richard Sherman, Talib turned them down, and he ended up accepting a deal to go to the Rams in the same division. So he thinks that the Rams have just as good a quarterback and a better opportunity. So Richard Sherman thinks it's the 49ers and Jimmy G, but there's other quality players out there who think in their division and other places in the NFL are just as good an opportunity.
I also wonder that if Aqib Talib hadn't signed with the Rams, if the Rams needed another corner, if Richard Sherman wouldn't have rather signed there. Like where he's now saying there's a bit of a, I would imagine, Monday morning quarterbacking. This is where I picked. Let me now tell you the reasons I picked there.
I think the Rams and Wade Phillips, the style of defense they're going to play, they're going to play more man-to-man. So Richard coming off an Achilles, he not the best man-to-man for me, pure player. A better combination zone man player. So when you have Wade, who has history with Talib, I believe that right there, it helps get him to the Rams.
Going back to Jimmy G for a second, how much of this is because of where he was the last couple of years? If he came to San Francisco, won 5 games, and played okay, would we be anointing him, the next big thing had he not sat behind Tom Brady? I mean, does that sort of factor into all this for other free agent veterans as well?
Listen, every part, we don't have a ton of evidence in the Jimmy G story, but every piece of the evidence is a positive one for him. The team that drafted him and the person that drafted him, Bill Belichick, that's a check in his column. How he played in the very brief 7 quarters he played when Tom Brady was suspended a couple years ago.
Especially the time when he took over starting the season when Tom was suspended.
That's what I'm talking.
I think that was the most important time.
Yeah, those 7 quarters he played in New England, but when Tom was suspended, when they went 2-0 and when he looked really good, that's a check in his column. Whether it was misreported or not, the hype surrounding him, it's going to take 2 first-round picks. That's a check in his column. And then Kyle Shanahan, who people think of very highly, going and getting him, and a team that was, let's not forget, the Niners were, after Cleveland, in the discussion as the worst team in the NFL.
Yes.
And then they went 5-0. And everyone played better. As CeCe put it, the hot dogs tasted better. So we don't have an overwhelming sample size. But every little piece of evidence we have, to me, seems to indicate, like he is the real deal.
Look at last year's free agency. Mike Glennon going from Tampa Bay to Chicago. A lot of hype. Didn't live up to it. In this year's free agency, who would you rather have? Jimmy Garoppolo or Case Keenum? All right, who would you rather have? Jimmy Garoppolo
don't make me choose.
Or Kirk Cousins? So when you talk about hype on quarterbacks, it goes with the position. So I believe that Jimmy had all these things, and he's young enough, hadn't taken a lot of hits, hadn't had a lot of bad experiences in the NFL, doesn't have bad tape out there. So I believe that even if they didn't play him, he would have still been one of the top 5 highest paid quarterbacks. So it was nice to see him play because that's what you want to do. When you trade for him, eventually, as soon as he can, you want him taking over that starting
role. The oh no Odell fallout continues. A few days after video surfaced of Giants receiver Odell Beckham Jr. holding what appeared to be an illicit substance, some have called for the Giants to move on from the young wide receiver. CeCe, how should the Giants handle Odell Beckham moving forward?
This is what we have to realize, too, with Odell's situation with the Giants. Even though he's been there, it's the only team he's been there. The general manager, Dave Gettleman, and the head coach, Pat Sherman, they just got there. So they deserve the chance, regardless of whatever happened with the other coaches, the other general manager, however the organization treated them before. Like these 2 gentlemen, they deserve the right to be able to try to guide his career in one direction or another. So it's easy for people to say, oh, they should get rid of him. Well, when you're trying to win football games and you're talking about getting rid of your best player, like what are your real options? Like what are they going to trade him for? Like are they going to get the right value for who he is?
And they'd be selling at an all-time low.
Absolutely.
Coming off an injury, that's what I mean. The timing of it, they would be trading Odell when his value has never been lower.
So what do they do?
I believe they're going to stay with him.
Or what do they do to send a message to him or to get through to him, or this idea of like talking to him and trying to get him to turn the page when the others couldn't?
This is the thing, because I know Sherman and Odell that they've met several times. And everything came out of the meeting very, very positive. But this is their first incident where they have something negative. How are they going to do? I believe that Gettleman, he is a very regimented person. Based on his history there in Carolina, I believe they will put forth some type of plan for Odell that if he gets off of the path, that they aren't outside the team, that they're going to discipline him. That means he might miss some time. But I just believe as far as his contract negotiation, that's the best way to get his attention. He's saying he wants $20 million. Well, what he's saying and what they're going to pay him based on, like if he was to sign right now, he couldn't demand that type of salary. So I believe in their salary demands, they can put more restrictions on him or more pressure on him than they can based on, okay, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. Odell knows the right things to do. The thing is, at what point in his career is he going to be consistent in doing those things?
So I think I think trading him would be insane. He's the best player on their team by a wide margin in my eyes. He is one of the very best players at his position. He's had one of the best starts to a wide receiver's career ever. Like, I think trading him would be nuts. You wouldn't get value. But I think the fact that he wants a new contract right now could be beneficial to the Giants in this regard. What if they went to him right now when he's in the heart of this firestorm? Say, you know what? We're going to give you that. You want to be the highest paid receiver ever? That contract? We've written it up. Here it is. But they can put in there many more clauses, outs, things. Hey, you have all this money, but if you fail this drug test, guess what? The guaranteed money goes away. If you get in trouble for this, this is what happens. I feel like they have leverage to make it a team-friendly contract that makes him the highest-paid wide receiver ever. And now, listen, maybe that doesn't change the behavior. Maybe that's not enough of a carrot out there. But that way you could protect it's a huge carrot.
Big carrot.
And you could protect yourself.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Regardless of what they decide to do, Odell's got to make up his mind. Do I want to be a star or do I want to be a great football player? Because right now, him going to premieres, red carpets, traveling around the world, like right now, he's trying to build his brand. But as a football player, it's going to suffer. So he has to make up his mind. Like, what do you want to do? Like, he wants people to recognize him as being one of the greatest athletes in the world.
Right.
But really, what has he accomplished so far in the National Football League? So this is a very, very interesting time for him.
Can I ask you a question real quick on that? Mm-hmm. Those two things, though, aren't always at opposition. Like building your brand as a star and becoming the best in the world at your craft.
Because the brand doesn't work if you can't make the football part.
No, of course, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is we have seen guys in the past do both. I feel like we've seen Odell in the past. I mean,
who in the NFL have you seen do that?
I think Aaron Rodgers is a pretty damn big star, and I think he works very hard.
What have you seen him starring at? Football.
But also, he does more commercials than most guys. How about J.J. Watt? I think J.J. Watt does a lot of things that are, and I think Odell's done it. Like, I'm asking this. There was no objective here. But when I'm saying,
I don't think J.J. Watt and Aaron Rodgers have done the same type of things or been to the same type of events that we've seen Odell at.
Certainly not the same type of events, but as far as publicly promoting yourself. Like, my question is to you, do you think, because I don't know, do you think you can simultaneously build your brand while also working your ass off?
He don't have no brand unless he's playing football. He's no juggler. He can't sing. He can't dance like that. Okay? His brand is football. And to me, become an expert at that. I wouldn't be as concerned about the other things because I believe they are a detriment to you. All right? His brand needs to be a clean brand that matches up with the National Football League, not with some of the other brands that are out there. And to me, being a great football player is more important than all the other stuff.
So do we agree that do we think the Giants are going to punish him for this, whatever you call punish, or they're just going to let it slide and factor it into the contract?
The Giants can only do a certain amount based on the collective bargaining agreement, and it could have been a cigar and everything. I know I'm smart enough to know better because even if it was that, the perception, all right? The perception of everything, the optics of it were very, very negative. He shouldn't have been in a place like that.
Right. All right, new topic now. Quarterbacks named Drew Brees. That's the topic. We'd been hearing all offseason that the free agent Brees was staying with the Saints, NFL's version of a no-brainer. But with free agency beginning tomorrow and no deal done with New Orleans, the Vikings have reportedly reached out to Brees' agent to see if he'd have any interest in playing for Minnesota. Brees turned 39 earlier this year, but threw for 23 touchdowns, only 7 interceptions last season. CeCe, would Drew Brees make the Vikings the best team in the NFL?
Ooh, that's a tough question. They are already a very good football team. I would say them and the Eagles, I would still give the Eagles the edge. And the reason why is because Carson Wentz. not Nick Foles, because Carson Wentz, and who he's going to be. The rest of this team you can see developing. They are going to have, if not the best defensive front, they're going to have one of the best defensive front. That offensive line, they get Jason Peters back next year, will be just as good or even better. Carson Wentz in his third year, he'll be better. They got a couple running backs, all right? Their wide receiver, there are not a lot of high-maintenance guys there. So I like Philadelphia. I think right now Philadelphia would be the best team, and they're the Super Bowl champs. The Vikings, they would be a very, very good team. Quarterback was not a strong suit for them, but I'm still have concerns about their offensive line. In a game versus the Eagles, how would the Vikings offensive line do against the Eagles defensive front? I don't think it'd be as lopsided as the NFC Championship game, but that's a part of the game where the Eagles are superior to the Vikings.
Listen, the Eagles earned and deserve all the respect in the world. I do think that if you went from average quarterback play to Drew Brees, the level we've seen from Drew Brees the last few years, while maintaining the rest of your roster, I do think that would make.
But the Vikings haven't gotten average quarterback play. From Sam Bradford, when Sam Bradford was playing, he had the highest completion percentage in the National League. He had a winning record. All right? They didn't have a great offensive line or a running game. Case played great. Case threw for almost 3,600 yards.
So, okay, so what do we call what they got from the quarterback play last year? Slightly above average? I don't think they had a top 10.
Look at Case's numbers.
I understand it, but we are also watching those games. We know what they were getting at. They were not winning the game through the quarterback.
I think because of our optics, if you look at how many yards per game he threw for, what was his average completion? If we weren't looking at Case Keenum and we could look at with blindfolds, we wouldn't look at the Vikings and say, wow, the Vikings, you know what they have to do this offseason? They have to upgrade their quarterback. No, we thought they needed to sign Case and continue what they were doing.
I'm not saying they had to upgrade their quarterback. What I am saying is I think if we were to look at all the numbers, I think they got somewhere between the 11th to 15th most productive quarterback play last year. I think if you go from that to Drew Brees, which I would expect to be one of the 4 most productive quarterbacks until he stops being that, I do think you become the best team in the league. But if you could parse Eagles or Vikings, like
I believe the Saints' offensive line is a lot better than the Vikings' offensive line when you rate them. The Saints have a top 5 offensive line.
Okay, fair, but I also think that Drew Brees has never in his career had a pair of wide receivers like they have in Minnesota right now. He's had good individual. Michael Thomas is an excellent player.
He had Brandon Cook and Michael Thomas.
But when they had those two guys together for the 1 year, they weren't able to quite get them on the same page, and Michael Thomas was a rookie. Like, he had Marcus Colston, who was a great player, but he didn't always have the complement. He had Joe Horn, who was a really good player, didn't always have the complement. But again, we're kind of parsing here. They would be one of the best teams in the league. We should tell the audience, why is this even a possibility? What's going on with New Orleans?
That's what I want to know. What is New Orleans thinking?
Well, it looks like according to the reports, the ownership there does not want to pay Drew Brees $30 million a year. And Drew Brees, understandably, is like, you got to be kidding me. I saw what Jimmy Garoppolo got. I can see what Kirk Cousins is about to get. And Drew Brees they both have leverage here. The Saints have leverage in that all reports are Drew Brees and his wife don't want to leave New Orleans.
They want to stay there.
Where he has leverage is this. His contract's odd, and it's a little boring, so I'll just be quick here. If they don't get a new contract done with him by 3 p.m. tomorrow, they take an $18 million cap charge based on the dead money left on his deal. If they do get a new deal done, they can make that $6 million a year for the next 3. So Drew Brees does have a bit of a deadline he can place on them, like, hey, if we don't have this done by tomorrow afternoon, that's $18 million of your $30 million in cap space gone. But you talked about this before the show. It doesn't seem like Drew and his family are in a hurry to leave New Orleans. Like, that's their prerogative necessarily.
Oh, yes. And also, if the Saints are hesitant, are they worried that he doesn't have anything left in the tank to pay him for another 3 years?
No, the Saints are running a business. Like, they're trying to see, they like to have Drew Brees, but at what price do they want to have him, and do they have to mortgage? Because they just started this last group of rookies that they drafted. Like, man, they don't want to mortgage the future. They feel like, man, we have some young stars in Lattimore, Michael Thomas, what you mentioned there. Like, they have some young stars. If we give Drew Brees $30 million, if we give him $90 million over 3, when these other contracts and the rest of the team, are we going to be able to put a team out there? It's a strange contract, but I believe with people calling Drew Brees yesterday, with free agency opened, I believe that will shock them enough that they potentially will get a deal done before that deadline.
Let me ask you the same question. How much does he have left in the tank?
I think he's got plenty left. I actually don't look at this at all, that the Saints are doubting what he has left. I think this is a bit of a game of chicken. I think Saints management believes he's never leaving. Like, I think they believe they can get him on a discount because he wants to stay there. He's played for another franchise, but this is the franchise everyone knows him as. Nobody remembers. It is a big gamble. But I don't think if they at any moment, like
I mean, what's the gamble? He ends up with the Saints or the Vikings.
Well, the gamble is the Saints don't have Drew Brees. And now they got to start from scratch when all the free agent
not a gamble for Brees.
Okay,
yeah. No. He thought you were saying a gamble for Drew.
Oh, no.
No, a gamble for the Saints. Yeah. It's a gamble for the Saints, but I think they believe he's not going to leave there and that he has already set up things post-playing career in New Orleans that benefit him greatly to stay in New Orleans where he won a championship.
A little outside.
We welcome in former Super Bowl champ David Deal. David, good morning. Thanks for being here.
It's always a pleasure. A little bit of snow, but nothing like last week. That's a good thing.
Of course. It is mid-March. Why wouldn't it snow in New York City the third time in like 10 days? But I don't think it's Is it sticking outside?
No.
I think we're good.
No, I think we're going to be good.
Fantastic. All right. Let's talk some drafts. The only bad thing about the NFL draft is that it puts an end to the mock drafts, because once we know where everyone is going, there's no point in guessing anymore. Joel Klatt has a great mock draft. He's got the Giants selecting Saquon Barkley at number 2. Some view the Penn State running back as the top prospect in the draft. So, David, I ask you, what should the Giants do with that number 2 pick, knowing everything that happened last year with Eli Manning?
Obviously, there's a lot that still can take place. Obviously, we can go back to last year, everything that took place with Eli Manning moving forward here into the 2018 season. That is the one thing that we know with Pat Sherman and Dave Gettleman. They said that Eli Manning will be the starting quarterback in 2018.
Yeah.
But to say that that number 2 pick is locked in right now, there's still a lot that can happen. Everybody's talking about the Cleveland Browns and all the moves that they made, Tyrod Taylor and Jarvis Landry, and everything they've done to bolster the roster, not only to help get free agents wanting to come to Cleveland, but to still have all those draft picks. You still think at that one position, they got to look at a quarterback and still think about taking one to think about the long-term future of the Cleveland Browns. The same thing can be said about the New York Giants. As of this morning, it looks like the Giants lost out in the bid for Andrew Norwell, which they needed at the guard position. Obviously, it looks like he's signing with Jacksonville. So when you think about that number 2 pick, obviously it's easy to think about Saquon Barkley with how inefficient the Giants' running game was last year. But having said that, you still have to fix the long-term solution at quarterback. I understand Eli Manning is the current starting quarterback, but at some time that expiration date is going to get checked. And for this Giants organization and this team, you don't ever want to be picking 2 ever again. Not to mention, if you look at the process 2 years down the road, next year's free agents in the NFL draft. Matt Ryan, he's not leaving Atlanta. Tyrod Taylor, he's not the future of the Giants. Nick Foles, he may get traded out of Philadelphia. Matt Schaub, no. Colt McCoy, no. Landry Jones, no. Ryan Griffin, no. Sean Mannion, Brett Hundley. I can go on and on. So if the Giants do not address the quarterback position with this number 2 pick, if they believe in a quarterback that's in this draft, it's going to be another 3 years to wait down the line to where they can pick that guy. And also, with that second pick, if the Browns are willing to move that number 4 to number 2, the Giants really have to think about, like I said, without Andrew Norwell, they've got to think about that offensive line, where at number 4, they could get Quentin Nelson. When you think about the Eagles, they just got Michael Bennett. You talked about fixing and addressing your offensive line. You have to do it, I believe, before getting that running back.
I think the Giants also have to go into the draft with some type of flexibility. Everyone is waiting on the Browns. Now, my suggestion to the Browns, forget the need at quarterback, because I believe that the top 3 quarterbacks are bundled up. And I can get one of those guys, because unless they're just in love with one guy. All right? If they're in love with one guy, okay, no problem. You should take him number 1, because Barkley is such a phenomenal talent. And I believe he has the ability, just like a quarterback does, to be able to change the Cleveland Browns. When you look at getting Tyrod Taylor, when you look at getting Jarvis Landry, if you add a running back to that, it's cold in Cleveland. There is no global warming coming there. You need to be able to run the ball, and you like to have a running back who has the versatility that Barkley brings as far as his ability to be able to come out of the backfield, and you can utilize him on special teams. This could make up for the Trent Richardson fiasco.
Wow.
He could be the back that they thought that he was when they made that huge mistake. It's hard for an organization when you've missed on 2 quarterbacks in Wentz and Deshaun Watson to take a running back in front of these quarterbacks. Cleveland will go with their natural instincts, take a quarterback. I believe Barkley will be available for the Giants, and when he's there, they're going to have to get over the fact that, man, we need a quarterback for the future, because the Giants are selecting number 2. That means they're selecting number 2 in the second round, too. So in that second round, I believe, take Barkley with the second pick, the second round, try to get back up into the first round and get yourself one of the 5 quarterbacks that have a first-round grade on.
So that's the trading back into the first, or maybe they love Lamar Jackson, who will probably be there with the second pick of the second round. Like, that is an interesting have your cake and eat it too scenario, right? Where you get potentially the best player in the draft and you get your long-term fix at quarterback. It's what the Cowboys, I don't think, knew they were doing it, but it's what the Cowboys may have done a few years ago, where they got maybe the best player in the draft in Ezekiel Elliott, and then also later they had to wait until they could wait until the 4th round to get Dak Prescott as their long-term fix at quarterback. But when the point you made, David, is the one that I can't get over. The New York Giants, when are you going to be drafting number 2 again? You hope never.
Yeah.
Since you drafted Eli Manning, you know how many times you've drafted, forget in the top 2, in the top 8, 0 times. Eli's been there 15 years. Like, this is a scenario that you hope to never duplicate. You hope that this is the last time you are even in this discussion. It is hard to find a way you are not drafting high again soon unless you have a contingency for Eli built in. So I understand the idea of, but man, we won 11 games just 2 years ago. Everything went to hell this year. We had injuries. The offensive line didn't gel. The defensive guys didn't play up to their contracts. Odell's coming back. We got an upgrade at coach. For all these reasons, let's go get the best player, go try to win this division. I feel like that is a myopic, short-sighted approach if, again, this is similar to what you said about the Browns, if there's a quarterback you love, if there's a quarterback that you grade out as a franchise-level quarterback, a quarterback that if you were drafting at number 9, you would take at number 9, I'd take him at number 2.
Is there a quarterback you love in this draft? Because I don't know if that Lamar scenario is going to work. I mean, you're taking a lot of chances and hoping that by taking Saquon that you're going to figure out a way to get him later. Is there a guy you like that you think would be a great fit for the Giants?
I'm an Allen guy. I'm an Allen fan. I've watched film on all these guys, Sam Darnold, Rosen, and Allen. For me, his upside, his ability to be able to sit and learn under this year, his size, his ability to move, and that arm strength is something that you can work on and groom in the right system with the right quarterback and coaches and system. And I think that's something that Pat Shermer brings to the table. In regards to Darnold, I don't know about his true leadership skills and his vocal ability to control and command the attention of a huddle, especially the fact that he has turned over the football a lot last season, not only throwing interceptions, but his ability not to have 2 hands on the football, get sacked, force fumbled, and give up the football that way. In regards to Josh Rosen, I understand in his technique, his fundamentals, he is the most sound, but once again, does he command that control? Is he the vocal guy in New York City and in the New York Giants locker room that can really direct and control that football team?
What makes you think that, because when you talked about Josh Allen, you talked about the measurables, but with the other guys, it was about the leadership capabilities. What makes you think Josh Allen has those things you think Rosen and Darnold might not?
I've covered his games before. I've sat down and interviewed him myself. He is quiet, calm. He has that confidence, and he has the perfect demeanor to fit in New York City.
But Eli doesn't have the perfect demeanor to fit in New York City. Never did. Real quiet. You would never look at him and say...
And that's the perfect demeanor in New York City, because you can't get too high, you can't get too low.
Oh, okay.
And throughout that time, even keel, Eli's right down the middle every time.
Yeah, but I don't think people give Eli enough credit.
Okay.
Man, Eli is a killer, man.
Oh, yeah.
Eli late in the game, don't get fooled by the, oh, shucks. I mean, look at his biggest wins. Look at the Giants' biggest wins, and look what Eli Manning did under the most the toughest conditions. 3rd down, 4th down, when they want to go for it, in Lambeau Field, in the Super Bowl. You just can't beat anybody and do those types of things. So I just know more about Eli, and I'm not going to say that's an act with Eli. That is his personality, but privately, man, Eli is a different guy than that.
Oh, yeah, because he is a constant competitor. You always hear wide receivers coming back to the huddle. I was open. No, you weren't. He'll set him down and direct him right away. And the biggest thing you never want to get from Eli Manning is a look from like your parents. I'm not mad, I'm disappointed.
I hate
when
that.
he gives you that look based upon preparation and the way that he demands and respects the same out of you like he does himself, it goes a long way in that locker room.
And the one other thing, Eli, and I'm not a huge Eli fan, but what he doesn't get enough credit for, he's never got enough credit for, is the guy's never been hurt. I mean, I'm sure he's been hurt, but he's never been injured. The only game he's ever missed was when they took him off the field. To play in that division for that long, in that weather, at his size, and to never miss a game due to injury is absolutely remarkable. His Iron Man streak, which obviously was broken last year.
Still trying to get it. 2018 quarterback shakeup is in full swing. Case Keenum is out of the mix. Kirk Cousins is very much in the mix. The options for Cousins now appear to be the Vikings, the Jets, and the Cardinals. Reports are Cousins looking for a deal that would pay him upwards of $90 million guaranteed. There's so much money going around. David, what do you think is the best fit for Kirk Cousins at this point?
For me personally, I think this is an easy answer. I think the perfect fit for him would be the Minnesota Vikings. I think when you look at their team, when you look at their roster, Stephon Diggs, Thielen, Rudolph, Jarius Wright coming off of the bench, and a running back in Cook coming off of injury, that gives him the pieces around him that he needs to be able to function in an up-tempo offense where he can plant his foot in 3, 5, 7, and with tempo get that football out of his hand. Not to mention, who is going there? John DeFilippo, the offensive coordinator, just left Philadelphia, now is in Minnesota. He will be able to tailor a game plan that is going to be specific to the strengths of Kirk Cousins, to this football team, and that gives him the best opportunity to succeed. Not just talking about money, but on the football field. That's where I think he can thrive.
But is go ahead.
I've talked the last couple of weeks, Jenna and David, about Cousins going to Minnesota. It's fairly obvious as far as the team that's around him. I believe that there is a drop-dead number because they have such a strong roster, because they have signed guys who they have drafted to their second contracts. I believe that there's a point where they'll get out of the game. Also, they made a decision by letting Case leave the building that they have substantial interest in these other free agent quarterbacks. We know they called Drew Brees. Right now, I would say that Kirk Cousins is probably their favorite because they don't know if Drew Brees is going to be available. But I like to make a case for the other teams now because I've talked enough about the Vikings. The Jets, they have the most salary cap room. He would be going to an NFC that, Nick, you and I have been going over, the AFC. He would be going to an AFC where, man, this thing is not top-heavy as far as quarterbacks in the AFC. His ability to be able to win against the Dolphins and Tannehill, whoever they're going to have in Buffalo. And listen, I don't care how many avocados Tom Brady eats. I don't care how many documentaries he got. At one day, he got to walk off that field. I mean, he's 40 now, so how long is that going to last? So it has to be advantageous to go to the Jets where he can get the type of money that is just drop-dead money. Like, after I sign this contract, man, I could just drop dead because I've made enough money. But also, I believe he can help shape an organization. He can help shape a culture, which very seldom are you ever going. They already have a culture in Minnesota. They have somewhat of a culture that Bruce Arians created there in Arizona. But I believe that Arizona, he has a family member there. Larry Fitzgerald signing on for potentially his last year, retiring as a first-ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players that's ever played for the Cardinals. So I believe that there is something pulling on him there. But the Jets and his ability to be at the top of the AFC as far as quarterbacks, that's got to be on his mind and realize, I don't care what offense they run. That's a good fit because that's something that he's never had.
Are we possibly making Kirk Cousins out to be bigger and more important than he is? I mean, we're talking about him as a difference maker to an entire organization when what do we really even know? I don't know what he did with the Reds with Washington.
Here's the thing. He had 3 straight years, 4,000 yards, 25 touchdowns. It's a short list of guys that have done that.
And yet, what did the team say?
The team walked away. Listen, I am not.
But it was a money thing, too.
It was a money thing, yep.
What Chris is saying is interesting to me because I think everyone acknowledges if the money's equal, go sign with the Vikings. They are obviously better than Arizona.
Yes.
They're obviously better than the Jets. Now, if I'm the Vikings, I don't know if I think that's the best option. I've talked about this many times. I think there are multiple ways to get to championship contention in the NFL. The way I haven't seen it done is paying a a mid-tier, above mid-tier, but not elite quarterback money. I think that's the best way to get stuck in neutral. I think when you look at the quarterbacks who have competed for championships, it's guys on rookie deals, future Hall of Famers, or guys that had their MVP year that year, like Cam did, like Matt Ryan did. So what we haven't seen is Joe Flacco post-contract. Ryan Tannehill, because he got a lot of money. People forgot that. Andy Dalton, given what the scale was, he got a lot of money.
Yep.
Those teams have not competed for titles. It's one of the reasons, by the way, I'm curious what the Raiders will be. Because where is Derek Carr? Is he going to be one of those?
Detroit.
Right, Detroit. I've talked about Matt Stafford. So on the Jets, what is interesting about the Jets is what CC alluded to, and I brought this up to Coach Mangini a while back, and he dismissed it, but I think you've got to do this math. All right, who is in my division? Who is in my conference? Who is in my way? In the NFC, here's who's in your way. Aaron Rodgers. Drew Brees for at least the next couple of years. Carson Wentz for the next 15. Russell Wilson for the next 10. That doesn't even get to Cam, Matt Ryan, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. That's 10 guys I've listed. In the AFC, who's in my way? Tom Brady, who's 40. Big Ben, who's talked about retirement.
Looks like he's 40.
Phillip Rivers, who's in the same class as Big Ben. Andrew Luck, who's coming off shoulder surgery. Deshaun Watson, who's coming off a torn knee. That's your list.
That's 5 guys.
If you're as good as you believe you are, Kirk Cousins, then don't you want to go somewhere where you can almost instantly be one of the premier quarterbacks? I get it, the Vikings have the better team. But if you're the force multiplier, you can be the guy that attracts people to New York. They got the money. It's a great market. Like, it's a winnable division aside from the Patriots. Like, the Dolphins and the Bills aren't scaring anybody. That does make them interesting.
But look at when Kirk Cousins doesn't have an offensive line, which the Jets need to address.
Yep.
And they need to address the wide receiver position.
Who's he throwing it to?
Who's he throwing it to? We all saw the issues that Kirk Cousins has when he doesn't have that supporting cast around him. He's not a quarterback that can put a football team on his back and carry you to a win. He has proven that, and he has shown that he doesn't have that ability. So when we saw with Terrell Pryor and with all the different receivers he had last year, the inefficiency, and then Chris Thompson goes out, what's to say right now with New York that hasn't made any significant moves offensively that they're going to do that? Because
so if he's
you can
not
go
that
out and
guy,
pay this money to him as a quarterback, but if you don't address the offensive line, he's going to be a bad quarterback making almost $30 million a year.
Let me ask you this. If he has those deficiencies, if he needs the stability in wide receiver, if he needs a great offensive line, then is he worth $30 million a year? Or are you just paying for what is a unicorn in pro football, which is a good quarterback who's a true free agent? Because that's what it feels like has happened to me.
Well, this is the thing. First of all, we have to adjust. The salary cap's approaching $180 million.
Yes.
Okay? So we've never seen this before. So if you're paying a guy $25 to $30 million, it's not as relevant as it was 5 years ago. It's not in the Flacco era. And then the reason why, Jenna, you say, well, how the heck do we know? Because of those numbers and because of the contracts Andy Dalton got and some of these other quarterbacks that are mid of the pack or the below the top 16 guys into the league. So they've had these demands. He is a free agent, so that makes the demand even go up more. Man, he is more than a competent quarterback. All right, you took away 2,000-yard receivers in Pierre Garçon, and he had significant problems on the offensive line, and he still put up over 4,000 yards. So a bad quarterback could not do that.
I have a quick question. If Cousins ends up going to the Jets and if Brees ends up staying in New Orleans, what options do the Vikings have at this point?
Well,
and maybe that could be why they're dangling a little bit more out there.
And that's why they're finding themselves in trouble, because they didn't do anything with Case Keenum. Now he's out of that mix to secure him. So if you don't secure Kirk Cousins, now what are you going to look? You're going to look back to Teddy Bridgewater, maybe A.J. McCarron. You're going to have to figure out something in your organization if these two who you were banking on don't pan out.
And with Case being off the market, I believe things will happen very fast.
Yes.
Drew Brees has the deadline. In the next 2 days, I look for 2 or 3 of these quarterbacks to be totally out of commission.
Welcome back to First Things First. Back to the NFL. Dolphins defensive tackle Ndamukong Suh is expected to be released tomorrow afternoon. Suh had been productive in Miami, recording 15.5 sacks the last 3 years, but not productive enough to justify the $114 million deal he signed back in 2015. He's not Ndamukong Brady. CC, can Suh help a Super Bowl contender at this point in his career?
For one, Ndamukong Suh has always made a lot of money. He was a top 5 pick, got the huge deal, the largest contract, especially largest number for a defensive player.
Yep.
But when you don't have sacks, like, how's he going to help a team? He's not going to get to the quarterback. He's going to take him out of the run game as far as a double team. You know, to me, there are so many other players that you can get that can affect the quarterback. Typically, defensive linemen, let's go to Philadelphia, won the Super Bowl. NFL teams will try to duplicate what they did. They'll try to get a rotation. So guys aren't playing 60 to 70 snaps a game. That's kind of the trend in the National Football League. So when you have a defensive tackle like him, how much money is he willing to play for? You know, is he going to take a huge pay cut? And Ndamukong Suh, he's not a bad guy, but you say, is he a locker room guy? No. But he has been known to stomp a guy on Thanksgiving. Yeah. So you need to consider that. When you have younger players going to be around him, I don't think he is the vocal leader that sometimes you need when a guy who is at his age and what you want him to do for a team. So I think buyer beware.
See, so I think at the right number, Suh is a great addition. I think Suh was hurt by 2 things. One, his level of play almost instantly in the league, and then his level of pay with Miami. He didn't go from being an all-pro player in Detroit to a replacement player in Miami. He went from all-pro to Pro Bowler. Now, that's a downgrade, but it's still better than most. Cris is right. He has not justified his salary, certainly with production getting to the quarterback. But he is still one of the most dominant run defenders in the league. Pro Football Focus last year had him as the 2nd best run defender on the interior defensive line behind only our guy, Snacks Harrison, guy that sat here a couple times. So do I think Suh could be a positive addition? Absolutely. But the contract the Dolphins gave him was always insane. You can't pay a D tackle like a quarterback. They were paying him $20 million a year before the cap went up, CC, and that's problematic for anybody. Like, it is very hard to justify any contract that makes you the highest paid in the history of your position. Like, if you're an A-plus player that hits free agency, you're almost by definition going to end up getting overpaid.
If he was getting 8 to 12 sacks, it would justify the money. Defensive tackles now in the league, they hadn't before. They didn't get a lot of sacks, but now they do, led by Aaron Donald. So he is not even in that, even though Pro Football Focus, the NFL is not a running league. When they go back to being a running league, then I can add a player like Ndamukong Suh. But it is not a running league. It is a throwing league. Yeah. And he is a situational player. That is in obvious running situations. Yes, he's dominant. He does require a double team, but he doesn't get to the passer, and he is not great in your locker room.
He's also a situational player in desire. He plays when he wants to play. He shows up when he wants to show up. And when he does it, he's there. But when he doesn't, I think you wonder what he's got left. So I guess my question to you, if it's not a Super Bowl contender, does he have, is there somewhere in the league where you see him fitting?
Listen, Ndamukong Suh is going to be on a roster soon. Like, the Ndamukong Suh, the Dolphins would have liked to keep Ndamukong Suh if it wasn't for his cap figure. And while what you said, Jenna, a lot of people say that, I don't know that I believe that. I don't know that I believe that Ndamukong Suh is a guy who's taken a bunch of plays off. I just think he's a guy whose production doesn't show up on the stat sheet, which, by the way, you can't pay $20 million for a guy his production doesn't show up on the stat sheet. But getting double teamed and freeing up other guys, being a guy that holds people to negative yards per carry or even 0 yards per carry is a beneficial thing. I think you pick a good team. If he'll sign for $7 million, I think that's a really good addition. If you got to pay him $12 million, I probably don't want him. To me, it's all about the salary.
Oh, this is the thing. When you add Ndamukong Suh, they added him to a defensive line that was very good. Did he make them any better? No, he didn't. Did he get that franchise, the Miami Dolphins, closer to the New England Patriots and Tom Brady? No, he didn't. And that's the reason why he's looking for employment today. As I said earlier, with Ndamukong Suh, buyer beware, because there are certain plays you see him, he looks like he's the best defensive tackle in football. And then on others, I watched the film, it looks like someone else is occupying his uniform. So I can understand why you would say, man, does this guy play hard all the time? It's hard to say a guy doesn't play hard, but there are times where he looks like a different player.
I'm Jenna Wolfe, and thank you for listening to the First Things First podcast. Make sure to subscribe and tell your friends, family, and coworkers about the podcast, which, by the way, is available on iTunes and all your favorite podcast apps. You can catch a fresh new episode every Monday through Friday on FS1, starting at 6:30 a.m. Eastern, 3:30 a.m. Pacific. So long, everyone.